She is the chair of PAGE, the Parent Action Group for Education, and has been a strong voice for Malaysian parents concerned about the standards of education in the country. My stakeholder today is Azimah Rahim. Good morning, Azimah. Welcome to the program, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Shireen. What an honor to have me here today. Thank you.
So we are going to talk about education, and as you know, education is the backbone of society. And recently we had COVID, which has disrupted learning as we know it. Just wondered if you could share with us your views of how disruptive COVID has been on children.
I'd like to refer to this survey research which was done recently by LeapEd. LeapEd manages the trust schools in Malaysia. And it was a paper done by Monash University Malaysia by Professor Nias. They came to the conclusion that 1 out of 3 students didn't find anything new to learn, new in their learning, post-COVID. And 2 out of 3 students didn't find that there was any support in the learning given. We see that with COVID, post-COVID, the learning loss, of course, obviously became a lot deeper. And before schools opened, the ministry said that they would assess students to see how much of the learning was lost. So over 2 months, they assessed students, and I suppose they came to a conclusion that so much needed to be done. But I think the action that was taken post-assessment was inadequate because they weren't able to cover that loss. And that loss continues to this day.
I read that every 3 months, that children were not in school, if they're below the age of 9 and 10 years old, is equivalent to 1 year of not learning. And I don't know, and I suppose more and more discussions will be taking place and more research as to the actual impact on the children. If we look at the situation here where we had some children with no connectivity, they had no devices, and some children had devices, some children had connectivity. How could we bridge the gap going forward to make sure that everybody is given an opportunity should something like this happen again?
During COVID, there were students who had devices and there were some who didn't. Yes. And those who had devices at least maybe maintained what they were already learning in schools. But of course, I think a large majority of them did not. This is one of the things we've been saying to the ministry. The children are already comfortable with devices. You should continue that routine or practice when they come back into schools. I don't see that happening. They should have taken advantage. They should capitalize on that way of learning by using devices, hardware, and there's so much software available, especially for science in English. So you don't even need to reinvent science and even math in English, because these children were already learning it from software and whatever devices they had from home. It was a matter of scaling up when the students came back to school. The ministry should have probably spent more on devices. You can even share devices. It doesn't need to be one-to-one. The software is readily available. It's a matter of picking out what you need for that lesson. And it need not even be English software. There's also a lot in Bahasa Malaysia. So I think when we did the teaching learning of science, maths and English in 2003, when the government brought in, spent 3 billion ringgit on hardware and software. We had already seen the use of, tools for learning. And I think we were so ahead of time that countries were coming to see how we were using, these learning tools, online and offline, to supplement teaching methods. Unfortunately, this was abolished. The teaching of science, maths, English was abolished, 6 years later. But at that time already, the ministry was looking at teachers as facilitators, and hardware and software were there to supplement teaching. And that's carried on, and if we had continued with that way of learning, we wouldn't have been impacted as badly during COVID. Right. Because we were already ahead of many countries. Right. So if we had not reversed, we wouldn't have been so badly affected.
I've seen some models where they've actually just taken computers, they've uploaded the e-learning programs, and then they've sent it out to rural areas. Not so much in Malaysia, but in other parts of the world. And the children there just, as long as they have power, they can actually learn from it. And the results have been amazing. And I don't know if maybe this is an answer or something do you think that we could do so that the children in the very, very rural areas are able to continue their competencies and skill set in education?
Absolutely, because as you said, we only need electricity. You don't even need internet, because a lot of the learning can be done offline. Right. It's a matter of loading it and then playing it. And not only that, there's also a teacher shortage. So this is how it's going to come in to help with the teacher shortage. I've just been told that we have something like, I think, 10,000 teacher shortages, and it's not just English teachers, but also Bahasa Melayu teachers. But all this can be learned. We just need the teacher to come in, facilitate the class, turn on the devices. The children know what to do. They'll be guided. And then the class just starts and continues and ends. And the more motivated the child is that the child can actually control his type of learning, and the child decides whether he wants to progress or not on his own. Independent learning. So the teachers is just there to facilitate and guide.
So if we look at some of the countries around the world and some of the bold decisions leadership has taken. So for example, I look at India. India in the old days, they decided that they were going to emphasize math and science. And you look at what that leadership decision has done to India today. India is unmatched. And they're producing individuals that are world-class. Indonesia has taken a bold step. They've got a technocrat entrepreneur to lead the education department or the education strategy. What do you think about taking bold steps for education? Do you think the time is right now and Malaysia needs to start looking at something like that?
Yeah, I think we had the opportunity to take bold steps a long time ago, and we didn't. And we're still debating over language when we should be flying to the moon. India and Malaysia has differences as well as similarities. We both inherited an English education system. The difference is that India is huge, and we are not. They've got, what, 1.2 billion population, we are only 32 million. But they decided that they would retain that English medium education system. We didn't. I think that was a mistake. Post-1969, after the racial riots, the education minister then, without going to the cabinet, decided on national TV that all English medium schools would be abolished. This is knowledge that many people are not aware of, because the Prime Minister then wanted to have a Malaysian identity. That was the start of Malay medium schools, and also the start of vernacular schools. Vernacular schools were enhanced. English medium schools died. And I think this was a great detriment to us, because even though they had wanted to boost the Malay language, make it international language, now 60 odd years down the road, we still haven't done that. You know, the language of ASEAN is English. Even Indonesia can't make it Bahasa Indonesia, and forget about Bahasa Melayu being the language of national, the language of ASEAN. It's not too late, because we started with PPSMI in 2003. That got abolished. We started again with the dual language program, giving the option to parents to decide whether their children are to be taught science and maths in English or national language. And that's been going on since 2016. I was part of the syndicate team. So now it's 2023. The Ministry of Education says that they're expanding, but I'm not too confident, because the only states which are really into the dual language program are Sarawak. Sarawak has gone 100%. They started with primary schools 100%, with 1,200 over schools. Primary schools, because they started primary schools. So of the 1,000 odd schools which are doing the dual language program, we take away Sarawak, there are only 348 schools, or just 7.5% of primary schools that offer the dual language program. And I think this is really pathetic. How are we going to move a nation if only a handful of schools, 348 primary schools out of 7,000 are offering the dual language program? And even so, there's probably just one class per level offering science and maths and English. So I think we really have to work on the numbers. The ministry really has to work on the numbers, because there are parents who are very happy to get their children to learn and to be taught science, maths and English. But the ministry appears to be putting in so many more conditions to make it so difficult for schools to apply to become schools that offer the dual language program. So because I was in the syndicated thing, we made it so very easy for schools to ask to be DLP schools. There were only three criteria. One was parents' written consent. Secondly, teachers must be ready. And thirdly, resources must be adequate in school. But along the way, the ultra-nationalists came in and said, we must give significance to the Bahasa Melayu. So now, for the schools to apply to become dual language program schools, they must meet the Bahasa Melayu criteria. They must meet the national average. So when you have this fourth criteria, you already stop half the schools from applying to become dual language programs, because they don't meet the national average for Bahasa Melayu, which is really odd. So the other question is, what is the ministry doing to ensure that this 50% of schools that don't meet the national average for Bahasa Melayu meet the national average, so that they can apply to become DLP schools? That is the question. And not only that, these 50% of schools which don't meet the DLP criteria are already immersed in Bahasa Melayu, because they only have English language, is 10% of lessons.
Right.
And yet they cannot meet the national average for Bahasa Melayu. The irony of it.
I mean, when you look at some of our successes as a country previously, many companies relocated here. They had the BPO, the business outsourcing program, because we had the language. So the languages, you had India, Philippines, and Malaysia. They came here to set up call centers because we had the language. So there is, there's a step further that we can think about when you can articulate in one of the most used languages in the world. Azimah, you've been pushing math and science and English for years. What drives you to do this?
All right. What drives me, I think, is because I truly believe our children have great potential.
Yeah.
They just need to be guided. I think we've been around since 2008. Page has been around since 2008. At least for now, I don't hear people saying that the English language is a colonial language anymore. So I think we've moved on. I also see that the rural folk are very open to the English language. Now I think the only people who are against the dual language program, that is learning science, maths and English, are those who just kind of open their minds to the importance of the English language. Until it's too late and they find that why are their children not getting the good jobs. And I think the government today, or rather the Ministry of Education today, should be looking at STEM. Focus on STEM, focus on English, and focus on the good jobs that our children will fill in the future. I think this idea of becoming more Islamic than PAS and using the children in school to do this, I think they've got it all wrong. They're on the wrong path. If parents are convinced that the education system is going to give the children better jobs, I think we will progress. And I think also, going back to India, India's decided that STEM is important. We need to change our mindset as well. STEM is important. I've also sat in the Science Education Committee of Academy Science Malaysia for 2 years. There were two things that we did. One was to bring in inquiry-based science education into the education system. We piloted some schools, they were doing very well, and now it's across the board. Oh, that's great. So that's fantastic. They've also been very, very supportive with us pushing science, maths and English. And I think that MOSTI should work more closely with MOE. MOSTI and MOE some time back set up the National STEM Centre. This was to cover everything STEM. But it started off, they were undecided whether to place it under MOSTI or MOE, but MOE decided they would take it. Unfortunately, with the new minister came in and closed it, which is a shame because there's so much thinking and so much hard work gone into setting up the National STEM Centre. Even if they had thought that the National STEM Centre had already fulfilled its purpose, they could have made it, given it broader responsibilities, right, and truly make it national. Unfortunately, the National STEM Centre was taken by MOE, was put in the basement of the MOE, and it was in the basement of the MOE, and it was equipped with hardware and software that nobody wanted. Right. Plus, it didn't have a budget, so it just died a natural death. So I think things like this, we have to have a bit more. We just have to open our minds to STEM, and I think this is the difference between India and us. We fail to do that, but I think it's not too late. I think we should focus on STEM because we need to become creators, innovators. Correct. And not just consumers. And this is the message that we've been saying all this time. And, everybody is using iPhones and smartphones. Why can't we make our own smartphones and iPads? Why can't we produce our own hardware and software? I think we're already producing our own software. We need to produce our own hardware and sell it. If you look internationally, we have so many Malaysians who are just world class. And it's not as if we can't. And I know that some countries, our neighboring countries, actually come to Malaysia to look for smart children. And then they offer them scholarships, and then off they go. And then they get ingrained in their system, and we just become an area to produce children to give to other people. And this is a sad fact, because then we're losing our own talent at a very young age. Exactly, because despite what we say about our poor education system, we're actually producing world-class global citizens, and countries like US, UK, Australia, and Singapore just step them up. Yes. And we're losing fantastic talent. We're actually subsidizing these developed countries, the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Azimah, thank you so much for being on the show. As usual, you've been enlightening and so forward-thinking.
Thanks a lot, Shireen. You know, we've still got a long way to go, but I think we just have to be consistent and persistent and provide the checks and balances as we have always been.
You heard a passionate Azimah Rahim of Page, who wants the government to take bold steps in education, especially in the teaching of science and mathematics in English, and the adoption of modern technology and tools to enhance learning. As Azimah said, Malaysian children have enormous potential. What the country needs are policies that empower and enable our children to thrive on the global stage. I am Shireen Muhiudeen. See you next time on Stakeholders with Shireen.